We have reports that the Minister of Power, Chief Adebayo Adelabu, has directed the Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN, and other agencies to commence immediate implementation of the recommendations from an interagency committee focused on reducing grid collapses. This move follows recent disturbances to the national grid, which experienced a frequency spike on November 7, 2024. TCN reported that recovery efforts are underway, with some regions like the Abuja axis restored quickly after the incident. Bolaji Tunji, the Special Advisor on Strategic Communications, conveyed the Minister's commitment to stabilizing the grid, with the committee's recommendations aimed at providing both immediate and long-term solutions. TCN General Manager Ndidimba added that critical repairs are ongoing on key transmission lines and substations, such as the Shiroro Mando line and Jeba transmission substation upgrades. The TCN had acknowledged that while the repair works may result in intermittent disruptions, these measures are essential to enhance grid resilience and minimize future collapses. The company appealed for public understanding as it remains focused on ensuring a stable power supply essential for Nigeria's socio-economic growth. Power is very important, like they have stated, in the economic growth of any nation. It affects every aspect of that nation down to security. So if there's a grid collapse, it calls for attention. It is a national concern. But then when we start having grid collapses over and over again, and then you have it within a short interval, then there's more to the problem than just something that is beyond human control right now. There is more, and it needs to be looked into. But then we've had the minister telling us, we even discussed something yesterday on the statement of the minister, and the fact that we should wait for 6 months. In the next 6 months, we'll have less of that, and we'll have the whole situation under control. But I'd like to get your thoughts on this story.
I think for me, I would sound somewhat sarcastic. Why I would sound sarcastic at this point is that, first, I should suspect if it's a scam or if it's a case of sabotage, because we no longer hear about subsidy. Now grid collapse. I can also tell you for free that some persons in Nigeria, within the last 2-3 years, they don't know anything that has to do with the national grid, especially the one that is GIRD. But for me, instead of our national grid of GIRD to collapse, the national grid of GREED, that one should collapse permanently.
That's the grid that we want to collapse.
That's the kind of grid we want to collapse, and not the national grid. We know that our economy is power-driven.
Which one do we even have bigger now? The national grid or the national grid, like you said?
The national grid, that one should collapse permanently. And once it collapses permanently, Nigeria will become a better place for you and I. But our economy being power-driven, the grid that we're managing to sustain our transmission line shouldn't collapse per second or at intervals like that. That means it leaves a question mark. What causes this collapse? Is it a case of vandalism? Is it a case of obsolete lines that maybe once there's sudden rain or wind, it collapses? These are things that we need to ask. If it has to do with faulty lines, then there should be proper reinforcement. If it has to do with vandalism, criminal acts, then they need to do some kind of searching. Ask questions. Increase surveillance to know where the point where these things are going.
There are some things that should not be heard of. There are some things that should not be heard of.
Of course.
There are some things that should just be taken care of. Like Nigeria should not even know how it is being done. Not that you shouldn't give them that information, but they should not even have a reason to want to find out. Imagine everybody now asking questions like, oh, why is the grid collapsing? What are the technicalities? So you now have to come out as a minister, explain to Nigerians that, oh, this is what happened. Using terminologies that people do not even understand. So I'm just imagining that this happened in other climes.
If this happens in other climes regularly, somebody will lose his job.
That is exactly what I am
saying. And if somebody doesn't lose his job, that person will go willingly if there's a system that is trying to sabotage the person's effort. So these are the questions we need to ask. What are the remote and immediate causes of this constant collapse of the national grid? Because if we don't know the remote and immediate cause, then a solution is not in view.
The minister has explained the causes, but the thing is, some of the explanation that he gave, like I said, using terminologies that people do not understand.
They should tell us if it's vandalization, if it's as a result of the lines, most of the being weak, so it collapses. We should know.
I know when they talked about vandalism was when some of the northern states did not have power, and that's when they said, oh, vandalism and all of that. But then, like I said, some things should not be heard off. Normally, when this is a national asset, there should be security on ground.
You know, like I always say, our greatest problem in Nigeria is that we're hardly proactive. We've always been reactionary. We only wait for problems to come, we start solving. They don't envisage. And so, okay, in the nearest future, we're going to have this kind of challenges. Let's work towards curbing it in case it comes up.
I don't even believe that we do not have security to protect some of these assets.
Then our also problem should be maintenance culture. Because one thing is to site a facility. Another thing is, what are the steps you take to maintain it regularly? If you don't maintain it, it will collapse. And our greatest problem in Nigeria has always been maintenance.
But there are some things that should not be, we should not talk about issues with maintenance for. For instance, if we're talking about issues with, maybe there's a park, like one of the parks we have, one of the notable parks we have in Nigeria. When I was going through documentaries, not just one, documentaries on the park, the current state of that park. And I found out that people were saying that people do not go to those parks anymore. You don't usually have people coming in anymore, just a few people. And then the workers of these places were saying something, that the issue they have is maintenance. And so they had to lock up some parts, they no longer use it. That is bad, but it is understandable. How can we be having issues of maintenance with something that has to do with, you know, power, especially something that feeds the nation?
There are plans for me. There must be plans for maintenance, because these are lines, and in as much as they are lines, it's either the weather will affect it because of the kind of rainfall we have here. There must, you see, the greatest challenge is that we were not proactive. Even if we are proactive, even if funds are kept aside for it, they don't even use it for such thing because it has not happened. Somebody somewhere will just be fleeting those funds, and any day it happens, it becomes a challenge. Otherwise, I strongly believe that most of these things, they have voted out funds for it, but the implementation part of it is another problem we have.
That's what I'm asking. We've had this collapse now over and over again. It didn't just happen once. Right? If it happens once, we'd say, okay, maybe it wasn't planned, maybe it's something natural, maybe it was a natural disaster, like they would always call the flooding, and then it happens again and again and again, over again. So my question now is our response. What would you say about our response to this situation?
Our response to this situation has been quite abysmal. It's been very slow, and in some situations, no response at all until it gets to the final stage where it becomes a major problem.
But with this that we have now, what case would you say it is? Is it a case of a slow response or a case of no response?
It's a case of either no response and it has lingered, so it has become a challenge. Ordinarily, if you notice a problem and you nip it in the bud, you discover that it won't escalate, it won't go beyond that point. But when it starts coming, you look at it, it's no problem, so long as it's still working.
So the statement by the minister, you do not see that as a response?
It's not they should go to work. It's not about talk. We've had so much talk with Nigerians, we've heard so much. It's now for them to transform those talk into work.
But we have the power has been restored already. Don't you think that's work being done?
If the power has been restored, what did they do to make it? Because for me, any form of restoration should be long-lasting. It's not something that it relapses. So what they are doing for me is more of patchment or patching than the real work.